Max, a retired German Shepherd service dog, unexpectedly appeared at the gates of Mercy General Hospital one seemingly ordinary morning. No one knew where he had come from or why he was there, but his sharp eyes and calm demeanor immediately drew everyone's attention. What began as the arrival of a stray dog quickly transformed into something extraordinary. Inside the hospital, baby Noah, just a few months old, was fighting for his life in intensive care. Meanwhile, his father, John, lay in a deep coma following a devastating accident. Two fragile lives, hanging by a thread, seemed to be waiting for a miracle. Little did anyone know that miracle would come in the form of a dog. The moment Max entered the hospital, it was as if he had a clear purpose. He instinctively found his way to Noah's room, where doctors and nurses were doing everything they could to save the infant. Strangely enough, after Max's arrival, Noah's condition began to show unexpected signs of improvement, something that baffled the entire medical team. What gave Max such an extraordinary influence? Was it the instincts of a service dog who had faced countless challenges in his past missions? Or was there something deeper at play? The journey of Max, Noah, and John at Mercy General Hospital is not just a heartwarming tale, but a powerful reminder of hope, resilience, and the bonds that transcend explanation. It was early morning at Mercy General Hospital, and the day had started like any other. Doctors moved briskly between wards. Nurses prepared their rounds, and patients' families sat anxiously in waiting rooms. The air was thick with routine and worry until an unusual visitor made his quiet entrance. Max appeared at the hospital's front entrance, his large frame silhouetted against the soft glow of the rising sun. His fur, a blend of dark browns and blacks, looked worn yet well-kept, suggesting he had traveled far but was no ordinary stray. There was something commanding about his presence, something that made people stop and take notice. He didn't bark or whine. Instead, he stood tall, surveying his surroundings with eyes that seemed to hold both wisdom and purpose. The hospital's security team was the first to spot him. Initially, they approached cautiously, unsure of what to make of the dog. Strays weren't uncommon in the city, but a dog of Max's stature, strong, alert, and oddly calm, was unusual. As one guard stepped forward to shoo him away, Max simply sat down and stared, his gaze steady and unyielding. It was as if he were saying, "I belong here." The guard hesitated, sensing that this was no ordinary dog. Inside the hospital, word of Max's arrival spread quickly. Staff members peered out of windows and doors, curious about the German shepherd who refused to leave. Some were amused, others indifferent, but a few felt a strange pull toward him. Among them was Nurse Ellen, a kind-hearted woman who had a soft spot for animals. She decided to approach him with a bowl of water and a piece of leftover sandwich from the staff room. To her surprise, Max didn't eat or drink immediately. He sniffed the offering politely but seemed uninterested. Instead, he stood up, wagged his tail gently, and began walking, not aimlessly, but with a sense of direction. Ellen, intrigued, decided to follow him. Max led her through the hospital's corridors, navigating with a precision that left Ellen speechless. He paused occasionally, as if checking his bearings, before continuing on. It wasn't long before they arrived at the neonatal intensive care unit, where baby Noah was being treated. Noah, born prematurely, was battling a severe infection and had been in critical condition for days. His parents, overwhelmed with worry, had been alternating between his bedside and the chapel, praying for a miracle. When Max stopped outside Noah's room, Ellen's curiosity turned into astonishment. The dog stood there, unmoving, staring through the glass at the tiny infant connected to a maze of tubes and monitors. How had he known to come here? What was drawing him to this particular child? Ellen couldn't explain it, but something about the moment felt profound. Doctors and nurses soon gathered, puzzled by the scene. Some suggested calling animal control, but others, like Ellen, felt there was no immediate harm in letting Max stay for a while. The dog's presence seemed almost comforting, and so Max was allowed to remain, sitting vigil outside Noah's room as the medical team worked tirelessly to stabilize the infant. Over the next few hours, something remarkable began to happen. Noah, whose condition had shown little improvement, started responding to treatment in ways that left his doctors baffled. His oxygen levels improved, his heart rate steadied, and his tiny body seemed to gather strength. It wasn't a miraculous recovery, not yet, but it was enough to give everyone hope. And through it all, Max remained at his post, his steady gaze fixed on the baby as if willing him to fight. Word of the hospital dog spread beyond the staff. Visitors and patients began stopping by to see him, and many swore they felt a sense of calm just being near him. For some, Max was a mystery; for others, a guardian angel in disguise. But for baby Noah, he was quickly becoming a beacon of hope. As night fell and the hospital quieted, Max lay down outside Noah's room, his head resting on his paws. The staff allowed him to stay, sensing that his presence was more than coincidental. Somewhere deep in the night, as the monitors beeped softly and Noah's parents clung to each other in prayer, it became clear that Max's arrival was only the beginning of something extraordinary. Mercy General Hospital was a place where life often hung in delicate balance, and amidst the whirlwind of beeping machines and hurried footsteps, every new life carried with it a fragile yet extraordinary hope. Baby Noah was one such life, a tiny miracle who had arrived far earlier than expected, fighting fiercely for his place in the world. Born at just 28 weeks, Noah weighed barely 2 pounds, his skin paper-thin and translucent. He was placed in the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, NICU, almost immediately after birth, where a specialized team of doctors and nurses worked tirelessly to stabilize his fragile body. Tubes and wires surrounded him, delivering oxygen, nutrients, and medication to help his tiny organs function. Yet even amidst the sterile machinery, there was something undeniably remarkable about Noah. His small, clenched fists seemed to defy the odds, as if he already understood the battle ahead. His parents, Grace and Michael, were first-time parents whose joy at Noah's birth was quickly overshadowed by fear. Grace spent her days sitting by the incubator, her hand pressed gently against the glass, whispering words of encouragement to her son. Michael, ever the optimist, would bring her coffee and remind her, "He's a fighter, Grace. He's got your strength." Still, the couple couldn't help but feel helpless as they watched their tiny boy fight for every breath. In the midst of this struggle, Nurse Emily emerged as a beacon of support. Emily had been a neonatal nurse for nearly a decade, her gentle demeanor and unwavering focus making her a favorite among both parents and colleagues. She had a knack for connecting with the families under her care, often serving as both a nurse and an emotional anchor during their most vulnerable moments. Emily was drawn to Noah from the very beginning. Something about his resilience spoke to her, reminding her why she had chosen this line of work. She spent extra time at his bedside, monitoring his vitals and adjusting his medications with meticulous care. But it wasn't just her medical expertise that made her indispensable. It was her ability to bring comfort in the midst of chaos. "Hi, little guy," Emily would say softly as she adjusted his blankets. "You're doing so well today. Keep it up, okay?" Her voice was calm and reassuring, as if she were speaking to an old friend rather than a newborn. Noah, of course, couldn't respond, but Emily liked to think he understood her in some small way. Grace and Michael quickly grew to trust Emily, often leaning on her for guidance and reassurance. "Do you think he'll be okay?" Grace asked one evening, her voice trembling with emotion. Emily paused, choosing her words carefully. "He's got a long road ahead," she said, "but he's stronger than he looks. And he's not alone. We're all here for him." That was the thing about Emily. She never made promises she couldn't keep, but her confidence and compassion had a way of instilling hope, even in the darkest moments. Outside the NICU, Emily's own life was far less structured. She lived alone in a modest apartment, her days consumed by long shifts and little time for herself. Yet she didn't mind. To her, the hospital was more than a workplace. It was a calling. And Noah, like so many other babies she had cared for, had become a part of her purpose. One evening, after a particularly long day, Emily lingered by Noah's incubator. The soft hum of machines filled the room, and the monitors displayed a steady rhythm, one that reassured her. "If only for the moment. You've got this," Noah, she whispered, her hand resting lightly on the incubator. We're all rooting for you. Little did Emily know that this tiny baby would soon become the center of something far greater than either of them could imagine. Noah's fight was just beginning, and Emily, with her unwavering dedication, would find herself at the heart of a story that would touch the lives of everyone at Mercy General Hospital. It was a night like any other in the NICU of Mercy General Hospital, or so it seemed. The hum of machines formed a rhythmic backdrop, punctuated by the occasional beep of monitors. Baby Noah, the tiniest warrior in the unit, lay in his incubator under the watchful eye of Nurse Emily. His fight had been anything but easy. Each day brought a new challenge, a sudden drop in oxygen levels, an alarming heart rate, or a fever that threatened to destabilize his fragile condition. But tonight, something changed. Emily had just finished her evening rounds, carefully noting Noah's vitals. His oxygen saturation levels had been fluctuating all day, and his heart rate was slightly erratic, a pattern that had kept everyone on edge. The doctors had warned Grace and Michael earlier that afternoon. We're doing everything we can, but his condition is critical. Their words echoed in Emily's mind as she sat down at her station to update Noah's chart. And then, the impossible happened. At precisely 2:17 a.m., Noah's monitors began to stabilize. His oxygen levels, which had stubbornly hovered below 85%, suddenly climbed to a steady 95%. His heart rate, which had been spiking unpredictably, now rested at a calm, rhythmic beat. Even his breathing, assisted by the ventilator, seemed smoother, less labored. Emily noticed the change immediately. She blinked at the monitor, then glanced at the incubator. Noah lay there, his tiny chest rising and falling in a perfect rhythm. For a moment, she thought it might be a glitch, a faulty reading caused by the machine. But a quick manual check of his vitals confirmed what the monitors were showing. Noah's condition had not just improved. It had stabilized in a way that defied explanation. She called for Dr. Patel, the attending physician. Doctor, you need to see this, Emily said, her voice a mixture of urgency and disbelief. Dr. Patel hurried over, his expression skeptical at first. But as he examined Noah and reviewed the data, his skepticism gave way to astonishment. This is remarkable, he muttered. I've never seen such a sudden improvement in a baby this premature. Word of Noah's miraculous stabilization spread quickly through the NICU. Grace and Michael, who had been trying to catch some sleep in the parents' lounge, were woken up and brought to the unit. When they saw their son, still tiny and fragile but now calm and steady, tears streamed down their faces. He looked so peaceful, Grace whispered, clutching Michael's hand. Despite the joy, there was an undercurrent of mystery. The medical team couldn't pinpoint what had caused the sudden improvement. There had been no change in Noah's medication, no new procedures or interventions. It was as if his tiny body had decided, against all odds, to heal itself. Emily, however, couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary had happened. She recalled a moment earlier in the evening when she had paused by Noah's incubator, her hand resting lightly on the glass. She had whispered a silent prayer, something she rarely did. Please, just give him a chance, she had thought, her eyes brimming with unspoken hope. Now, as she watched Noah sleep, she couldn't help but wonder if that prayer, or something greater, had been heard. The days that followed only deepened the mystery. Noah continued to thrive, his vitals remaining stable despite his earlier struggles. The medical team ran tests, analyzed his progress, and reviewed every detail of his care, searching for answers. But no clear explanation emerged. For Grace and Michael, it didn't matter why or how. All they cared about was that their son was getting stronger, his tiny fists clenching and unclenching as if to signal his determination to live. For Emily, though, the mystery lingered. She found herself drawn to Noah's bedside even more than before, her thoughts filled with questions she couldn't quite articulate. Was this a one-time event, or was there something about Noah, some unexplainable resilience, that science couldn't measure? Whatever the case, one thing was certain: Noah's journey was far from over, and Emily was determined to be there every step of the way, whether it was science, faith, or sheer willpower. Something extraordinary had happened that night, and as Emily looked at the tiny warrior in the incubator, she knew deep down that his story was only just beginning. The connection between Max Noah and John was one that defied the boundaries of logic, time, and space, a bond forged in mystery and perhaps something even greater. On the surface, their lives appeared unconnected. Max, a middle-aged man with a heavy past, had arrived at the hospital seeking redemption. Baby Noah, fragile and new to the world, was fighting for survival with every breath. And then there was John, Noah's father, a man torn between despair and hope as he watched his son struggle. Yet, unseen forces seemed to weave their fates together into a story that was both profound and unexplainable. John had always been a man of reason, a skeptic who believed in what he could see and measure. As an engineer, his world revolved around calculations, structure, and predictability, but nothing about the past few weeks had made sense. The birth of his son, 10 weeks premature, had thrown his life into chaos. Noah's fight for survival had left John grappling with feelings he couldn't rationalize: guilt, helplessness, and an overwhelming need to protect his child. The night Max arrived at the hospital was like any other in John's increasingly blurred existence. He was sitting in the NICU parents' lounge, his head buried in his hands, when a stranger's voice interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Rough night? John looked up to see a man with kind but weary eyes. There was something about the man's presence, calm yet intense, that made John sit up straight. "You could say that," John replied, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "I'm Max," the man said, taking a seat across from him. He didn't press for details, but something in his tone invited John to speak. And for reasons John couldn't explain, he found himself pouring out everything: the fear of losing Noah, the strain it had put on his marriage, and the crushing weight of feeling powerless. Max listened intently, his expression unreadable but somehow comforting. When John finished, Max leaned forward, his voice low and steady. "You're stronger than you think, John, and so is your son." John frowned. "How do you know that?" Max smiled faintly. "Let's just say I've seen what resilience looks like, even in the smallest of beings." Their conversation was brief, but it left John with a strange sense of reassurance, as if Max had spoken directly to the part of him that still held on to hope. Later that night, something extraordinary happened. Noah, who had been teetering on the edge of stability, suddenly showed signs of improvement. His oxygen levels normalized, his heart rate steadied, and for the first time in weeks, his breathing seemed less labored. John rushed to the NICU when Nurse Emily called with the news. Standing by Noah's incubator, he felt an overwhelming surge of emotion, relief, joy, and a lingering sense of wonder. As he gazed at his son, he couldn't help but think of Max's words. The following days brought more questions than answers. Noah continued to improve, defying the odds and the doctor's cautious expectations. John couldn't shake the feeling that Max had played some role in this sudden turn of events, though he couldn't explain how or why. When John tried to find Max to thank him, he discovered something strange. None of the hospital staff knew who Max was. He wasn't listed as a patient or visitor, and no one else seemed to remember seeing him. It was as if Max had appeared out of nowhere and vanished just as suddenly. The mystery deepened when John found a small note tucked into his jacket pocket, written in handwriting he didn't recognize. "Stay strong. The fight isn't over, but you're not alone." John stared at the note, his mind racing. Had Max left it? If so, how had he known where to find John's jacket? And what did he mean by "you're not alone"? As the days turned into weeks, John began to notice subtle changes in himself. He started to believe in things he couldn't see or explain. He spent more time by Noah's side, talking to him, telling him stories about the life he would live once he was strong enough to leave the hospital. Meanwhile, Emily couldn't ignore the strange connection between Max's arrival and Noah's miraculous stabilization. She, too, had spoken briefly with Max the night he appeared. He had stopped by the NICU, his gaze fixed on Noah's incubator as if drawn to it. "He's a fighter," Max had said softly, almost to himself, though she couldn't explain it. Emily felt that Max had brought something with him, an energy, a presence, or perhaps just a reminder that miracles could happen in the most unlikely of circumstances. For John, the mystery of Max became less about finding answers and more about embracing the unexplainable. Whether Max was a stranger, a messenger, or something else entirely, his words had sparked a shift in John's heart. He began to see Noah not as a fragile baby on the brink of survival, but as a symbol of resilience and hope. And so, the connection between Max Noah and John remained a mystery, one that defied logic but brought them all closer to something greater, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is light, and in the most fragile lives, there is strength beyond measure. In the sterile, structured world of a hospital, there exists a delicate balance between rules and the innate need for compassion. The hospital, with its endless regulations and protocols, operates like a finely tuned machine. Every procedure, every action is dictated by a set of well-established guidelines meant to ensure safety, order, and efficiency. But even within these rigid frameworks, human emotions, raw and untamed, find their way through the cracks. And in the moments of crisis, when patients are hanging on to life by a thread, when families are on the edge of despair, the question arises, can compassion truly exist in a system so governed by regulations? For Nurse Emily, this question was a daily dilemma. As a seasoned nurse in the NICU, she had seen countless cases of preterm babies, parents struggling with the unknown, and doctors following strict protocols. Yet, it was always the moments where human connection transcended the cold walls of regulations that stuck with her. It was when she saw the parents huddled by their baby's incubator, praying, hoping, and willing their child to survive. Those were the moments she felt her role as a nurse was more than just following orders. It was about being there, truly being there, for the families in the most intimate and vulnerable of moments. But this instinct to provide compassion, to offer solace where the heartache seemed endless, often clashed with the stringent rules of the hospital. For every emotional moment Emily shared with the families, there were policies in place that restricted her from acting beyond her prescribed duties. One such incident happened when baby Noah was still in critical condition. John, his father, had been holding on to hope despite the odds, spending hours by the incubator, silently praying for his son's survival. Emily, always one to support the parents, had noticed the toll the constant worry had taken on him. She suggested that he take a break, perhaps get something to eat or step outside for a moment of air. But hospital policy was clear. Only immediate family members were allowed at the incubators for more than a few minutes at a time. Visitors had to be monitored, and parents could only stay in designated areas. There was no exception for a father whose heart was breaking, watching his son struggle to breathe. As Emily stood at the door, she saw John's weary face and felt the sharp tug of compassion in her chest. She knew the regulations. She had read them 1,000 times, followed them without question. But as she watched John's slumped shoulders and the hollow look in his eyes, the human side of her was torn. Was it really necessary to follow every single rule to the letter, especially when a simple gesture could make such a difference in someone's emotional well-being? That day, Emily bent the rules. She allowed John to stay longer than the prescribed visiting hours, even though technically, she was supposed to report the violation. She told herself it was for Noah's sake. After all, his father needed him. She offered a sympathetic smile and reassured John that she would be there if he needed anything. But the guilt lingered. Later that evening, as Emily filled out her shift reports, she pondered the conflict she faced. Hospital rules weren't there to punish. They were there to protect. They were meant to ensure that the NICU was a safe and controlled environment for vulnerable babies. But sometimes, the heartache in a parent's eyes outweighed the importance of the regulations. As the days went by, the line between hospital policies and her compassionate instincts blurred. Emily had to continually ask herself whether following the rules to the letter was always the best approach in situations where lives and emotions were at stake. She wasn't alone in her thoughts. Many of her colleagues wrestled with the same ethical dilemmas. Dr. Lawrence, a respected NICU pediatrician, often said that while rules were essential for the operational success of the hospital, they couldn't replace the human touch. There was another moment, shortly after baby Noah's condition began to stabilize, when Emily witnessed yet another example of this delicate balance. John had been struggling with his wife, Sarah, over how to cope with the fear and trauma they both carried. Hospital regulations dictated that families of critically ill children attend mandatory counseling sessions. But Sarah, overwhelmed and emotionally drained, refused to participate. John was caught between his wife's wishes and the hospital's insistence that the counseling sessions were part of Noah's holistic care. Emily understood Sarah's resistance. After weeks of emotional turmoil, the thought of opening up to a stranger felt like a betrayal. But she also knew that mental health was just as important as physical health in a hospital setting. With the hospital's regulations in mind, Emily sat down with John and gently urged him to talk to Sarah about the counseling. She explained, with compassion, that it wasn't just about following rules, it was about helping both of them heal. While Emily didn't have the power to make the final decision, she felt that this kind of conversation was necessary for the family to move forward. Yet, in the back of her mind, Emily still wondered if the rules should be so black and white. Sometimes, it felt as though the system valued efficiency more than the well-being of the people who relied on it. Could there be room for more flexibility in the regulations? Could there be a balance between structured care and the emotional healing that could only come from kindness and understanding? This constant push and pull between the hospital's regulations and the innate desire for compassion was something every healthcare professional faced. It was a challenge that didn't have an easy answer, and often, it required the staff to navigate their own moral compass while balancing the needs of their patients. For Emily, though, it was a reminder that healthcare wasn't just about medicine. It was about people, and sometimes, the most profound healing came not from a prescription or a procedure, but from a simple act of kindness. As she continued her shift, Emily found herself reflecting on the importance of both regulations and compassion. One could not exist without the other. But the question remained, in the end, would the heart or the rules prevail? In a hospital, where every minute counts and every decision can mean the difference between life and death, the need for unity and collaboration is paramount. A hospital is not just a building filled with medical equipment and technology. It is a complex ecosystem made up of diverse professionals who work together to ensure the well-being of their patients. Doctors, nurses, therapists, technicians, and administrative staff each has a vital role to play in the healing process. And while each of these roles is distinct, the most effective healthcare delivery occurs when everyone works in harmony. For Nurse Emily, this truth became clear every day as she navigated the demanding and fast-paced environment of the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, NICU. As a nurse, her primary responsibility was patient care, but that care was only part of the equation. Her role extended beyond administering medications and monitoring vital signs. It included working closely with the doctors, therapists, social workers, and even the family members of the patients. Collaboration was not just a skill, it was a necessity. One of the key aspects of successful collaboration in a hospital is the multidisciplinary approach to patient care. In the NICU, where babies like Noah are often fighting for their lives, it's essential that all healthcare professionals come together to form a cohesive care plan. Doctors, with their specialized knowledge, provide medical diagnoses and treatment plans, while nurses like Emily offer hands-on care and monitor the baby's progress. Respiratory therapists manage breathing support. Social workers assist families with emotional support and resources. And dietitians make sure the baby is getting the proper nutrition. This unity of purpose, the shared goal of saving lives and promoting health, creates a culture of mutual respect and cooperation. However, the road to this collaborative environment is not always smooth. There are times when conflicting opinions arise, or when the sheer pressure of the situation causes tensions to run high. Yet, even in those challenging moments, the professionals in a hospital must remember that they are all working toward the same end, the best possible outcome for their patients. The story of baby Noah, for example, demonstrated the incredible power of teamwork in a hospital setting. When Noah was first admitted to the NICU, he was extremely fragile, and his survival seemed uncertain. The doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize him, using all the tools at their disposal. But it was the combined efforts of the entire NICU team that ultimately led to his recovery. Nurse Emily, working alongside the neonatologists, kept a close eye on Noah's vital signs, made sure he was receiving the right medication, and offered comfort to his anxious parents. The respiratory therapists ensured that Noah was receiving optimal support for his lungs, while the nutritionists worked with Emily to create a feeding plan that would give Noah the best chance of survival. Meanwhile, social workers were available to support John and Sarah, Noah's parents, who were overwhelmed with anxiety and fear. Each member of the team brought their expertise, but it was their ability to collaborate that made the difference. When Emily noticed a change in Noah's condition, something that the doctors hadn't observed during their rounds, she was able to communicate her concerns immediately. She wasn't just a nurse following orders. She was an integral part of the team whose observations and input were valued. Likewise, when the doctors suggested adjustments to Noah's treatment plan, Emily worked to implement those changes, ensuring that Noah received the best possible care. In moments like these, the unity within the hospital becomes not just a matter of professional efficiency but of human compassion. It's easy to see how teamwork can save lives in a medical sense, but it also fosters emotional well-being for both the patients and their families. John and Sarah, despite their fears, were able to trust that Noah was in good hands because they saw the unity and dedication in the team caring for him. They saw the doctors and nurses working together seamlessly, their actions coordinated and thoughtful. This sense of trust was crucial for the parents, who were navigating the emotional roller coaster of having a critically ill child. But unity and collaboration go beyond just the immediate healthcare providers. They extend to the families, too. John and Sarah were part of the team in their own way. They were essential to Noah's recovery, as their involvement in his care, whether through comforting him or providing necessary information about his health history, was integral. Nurses like Emily worked not only with their colleagues, but also with the parents, guiding them, teaching them, and reassuring them when necessary. The strength of the team lay in the recognition that every member, from the most senior doctor to the newest nurse, played a vital part in the care process. This collective approach requires clear communication, respect, and a shared commitment to the well-being of the patient. In high-stakes situations, like those in the NICU, mistakes can be costly. Thus, maintaining open lines of communication is crucial. It's important for every team member to feel empowered to speak up, to share their insights, and to raise concerns. Whether it's a small adjustment to a treatment plan or a larger issue that could affect the patient's recovery, collaboration ensures that all perspectives are considered and the best possible decision is made. Despite the high levels of stress and the emotional strain that many hospital staff experience, there is a unique sense of camaraderie that forms among healthcare professionals. It's the bond forged through shared experiences, the mutual understanding that they are all in this together, working toward the same goal. In some ways, the hospital becomes a second family, one that understands the pressures and rewards of the job. For Emily, this camaraderie provided a source of strength and support. There were times when she felt overwhelmed, when the weight of responsibility seemed unbearable, but it was the knowledge that she was part of a larger team that kept her going. This collaboration extends to the hospital's leadership as well. Effective leaders foster an environment where teamwork is prioritized, where communication is encouraged, and where every member of the team feels valued. Leaders like Dr. Lawrence, who encouraged open discussions and a sense of shared responsibility, played a pivotal role in ensuring that the NICU was not just a space for medical treatment, but a place where unity and compassion were at the core of care. In the end, the unity and collaboration within a hospital are what truly make the difference. It is the strength of the team, doctors, nurses, therapists, technicians, and support staff that allows hospitals to provide the level of care that patients need. And as Nurse Emily and her colleagues showed with baby Noah, when a team works together with mutual respect and a shared goal, they can overcome even the greatest challenges. One patient at a time, John had been lying in a deep, almost unbroken slumber for what felt like an eternity. His body was frail and exhausted, his mind clouded by a haze that he couldn't quite explain. The beeping of machines, the soft whispers of nurses, and the occasional footsteps in the corridor all blended into an indistinct background. Time seemed to have stopped, or at least it felt as though the world had moved on without him. It wasn't until the faint sound of his own name, barely a whisper but enough to stir something deep within him, that John began to sense the world around him again. His eyelids fluttered as if unwilling to part, his body yearning for more rest. But a sense of urgency slowly crept in. The past days, or was it weeks, had been a blur. The memory of the accident, the pain, and the long nights in the hospital were distant echoes, lingering just out of reach. But there was something else now, something that made him want to open his eyes, to reconnect with the world he thought he had left behind. A sudden, sharp sound, the sound of a door opening, cut through the haze of his thoughts. His eyelids twitched again, and with an effort that seemed almost monumental, John slowly pried them open. The blinding light of the hospital room assaulted his senses, but it was the figure at the foot of his bed that truly caught his attention. His breath hitched as he saw her, a nurse, her face a mixture of concern and surprise. But beneath that, there was something else, recognition, relief. "John," the nurse asked softly, her voice gentle, yet filled with disbelief. "Can you hear me?" His mind struggled to grasp her words, to make sense of everything. He opened his mouth to speak, but his throat was dry, constricted, as if he hadn't used it in years. He tried again, this time with more effort, his voice croaky and faint. "W, or where am I?" The nurse's face softened, and she moved closer, adjusting the machines surrounding his bed. "You're in the hospital, John," she said, her voice soothing. "You've been unconscious for a while, but you're awake now, and you're going to be okay." John's mind reeled as he tried to process her words. Hospital, unconscious. Okay, it didn't make sense. He tried to sit up, but his body felt weak, uncoordinated, as though he hadn't moved in a long time. Panic surged in him. "Where's my son? Where's Noah?" His heart raced as he grasped at the remnants of his memories. The nurse's face shifted, her expression unreadable for a moment. She glanced toward the door, then back at him. "Noah's doing well," she said slowly, her words carefully chosen. "He's stable, John. He's been fighting hard." The relief that flooded John's chest was overwhelming. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, savoring the sensation of knowing that Noah, his precious son, was still alive, still fighting. But the questions that had been gnawing at him, the confusion about how he had ended up in the hospital, the time that seemed to have vanished, and the strange, hollow feeling that lingered in his chest, remained unanswered. "What happened?" John whispered hoarsely. "How did I get here?" The nurse hesitated. She looked over her shoulder as if weighing how much to say. Finally, she returned her gaze to him. "You were in an accident," she explained gently. "A very serious one. You've been in a coma for the last few days." The pieces of the puzzle slowly began to fall into place. John's mind reeled as fragments of memory flickered in and out, flashes of the accident, the impact, the chaos of the moments that had followed. But it was still hazy, like trying to grasp at smoke. The details were elusive, slipping through his fingers just when he thought he had a hold on them. The nurse's soft hand rested on his arm, offering a sense of warmth and reassurance. "We weren't sure you were going to wake up," she added, her voice tinged with emotion. "But you've made it through. You're a fighter, John." John nodded slowly, his mind racing to catch up with the reality around him. He could hear the steady beep of the heart monitor, feel the dull ache in his body, and yet there was a sense of disbelief that washed over him. How had he survived? How had he made it through when so many others didn't? Before he could voice his next question, the door to his room opened once more. And this time, it wasn't just the nurse standing there. A familiar face appeared, and John's heart skipped a beat. It was Emily, the nurse who had been with him through the most difficult moments. Her face was a mix of relief and joy, her eyes bright with a look he hadn't seen in what felt like forever. "John," Emily said, her voice breaking the stillness of the room. "You're awake. I can't believe it. We were all so worried." John's gaze locked onto her, and for the first time since he had awoken, a smile tugged at the corners of his lips. Emily had been a constant presence during his time in the hospital, her kindness and care something he had come to rely on. And now, seeing her here, alive and well, was like a lifeline being thrown to him in the midst of his confusion. "Emily," John whispered, his voice still raspy. "Thank you. Thank you for everything." Emily smiled softly, stepping closer to his bed. "You don't have to thank me," she said, her voice warm. "We were all just doing our jobs. But I'm so glad you're awake. So glad you're here." John's heart swelled with gratitude. But there was one thing that remained at the forefront of his mind: his son, Noah. He couldn't shake the worry that still gnawed at him. "How is he?" John asked again, his voice more urgent now. Emily's expression softened as she moved to his side. "Noah's in the NICU. He's stable. They're taking good care of him." The weight of her words sank in, and John finally allowed himself to exhale. Noah was alive. There was hope. But as he lay there, struggling to piece together the fragments of his own life, he realized that this moment, the miraculous awakening from his coma, was only the beginning. There was much more to discover, more to understand. But for now, he would hold on to the fact that he was awake, that Noah was alive, and that, together, they still had a chance. John had been lying in a deep, almost unbroken slumber for what felt like an eternity. His body was frail and exhausted, his mind clouded by a haze that he couldn't quite explain. The beeping of machines, the soft whispers of nurses, and the occasional footsteps in the corridor all blended into an indistinct background. Time seemed to have stopped, or at least it felt as though the world had moved on without him. It wasn't until the faint sound of his own name, barely a whisper but enough to stir something deep within him, that John began to sense the world around him again. His eyelids fluttered as if unwilling to part, his body yearning for more rest. But a sense of urgency slowly crept in. The past days, or was it weeks, had been a blur. The memory of the accident, the pain, and the long nights in the hospital were distant echoes, lingering just out of reach. But there was something else now, something that made him want to open his eyes, to reconnect with the world he thought he had left behind. A sudden, sharp sound, the sound of a door opening, cut through the haze of his thoughts. His eyelids twitched again, and with an effort that seemed almost monumental, John slowly pried them open. The blinding light of the hospital room assaulted his senses, but it was the figure at the foot of his bed that truly caught his attention. His breath hitched as he saw her, a nurse, her face a mixture of concern and surprise. But beneath that, there was something else: recognition, relief. "John?" the nurse asked softly, her voice gentle, yet filled with disbelief. "Can you hear me?" His mind struggled to grasp her words, to make sense of everything. He opened his mouth to speak, but his throat was dry, constricted, as if he hadn't used it in years. He tried again, this time with more effort, his voice croaky and faint. "W, or where am I?" The nurse's face softened, and she moved closer, adjusting the machines surrounding his bed. "You're in the hospital, John," she said, her voice soothing. "You've been unconscious for a while, but you're awake now, and you're going to be okay." John's mind reeled as he tried to process her words. Hospital, unconscious. Okay, it didn't make sense. He tried to sit up, but his body felt weak, uncoordinated, as though he hadn't moved in a long time. Panic surged in him. Where's my son? Where's Noah? His heart raced as he grasped at the remnants of his memories. The nurse's face shifted, her expression unreadable for a moment. She glanced toward the door, then back at him. "Noah's doing well," she said slowly, her words carefully chosen. "He's stable, John. He's been fighting hard." The relief that flooded John's chest was overwhelming. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, savoring the sensation of knowing that Noah, his precious son, was still alive, still fighting. But the questions that had been gnawing at him, the confusion about how he had ended up in the hospital, the time that seemed to have vanished, and the strange, hollow feeling that lingered in his chest, remained unanswered. "What happened?" John whispered hoarsely. "How did I get here?" The nurse hesitated. She looked over her shoulder as if weighing how much to say. Finally, she returned her gaze to him. "You were in an accident," she explained gently. "A very serious one. You've been in a coma for the last few days." The pieces of the puzzle slowly began to fall into place. John's mind reeled as fragments of memory flickered in and out, flashes of the accident, the impact, the chaos of the moments that had followed. But it was still hazy, like trying to grasp at smoke. The details were elusive, slipping through his fingers just when he thought he had a hold on them. The nurse's soft hand rested on his arm, offering a sense of warmth and reassurance. "We weren't sure you were going to wake up," she added, her voice tinged with emotion. "But you've made it through. You're a fighter, John." John nodded slowly, his mind racing to catch up with the reality around him. He could hear the steady beep of the heart monitor, feel the dull ache in his body, and yet there was a sense of disbelief that washed over him. How had he survived? How had he made it through when so many others didn't? Before he could voice his next question, the door to his room opened once more. And this time, it wasn't just the nurse standing there. A familiar face appeared, and John's heart skipped a beat. It was Emily, the nurse who had been with him through the most difficult moments. Her face was a mix of relief and joy, her eyes bright with a look he hadn't seen in what felt like forever. "John," Emily said, her voice breaking the stillness of the room. "You're awake. I can't believe it. We were all so worried." John's gaze locked onto her, and for the first time since he had awoken, a smile tugged at the corners of his lips. Emily had been a constant presence during his time in the hospital, her kindness and care something he had come to rely on. And now, seeing her here, alive and well, was like a lifeline being thrown to him in the midst of his confusion. "Emily," John whispered, his voice still raspy. "Thank you. Thank you for everything." Emily smiled softly, stepping closer to his bed. "You don't have to thank me," she said, her voice warm. "We were all just doing our jobs. But I'm so glad you're awake. So glad you're here." John's heart swelled with gratitude. But there was one thing that remained at the forefront of his mind. His son, Noah. He couldn't shake the worry that still gnawed at him. "How is he?" John asked again, his voice more urgent now. Emily's expression softened as she moved to his side. "Noah's in the NICU. He's stable. They're taking good care of him." The weight of her words sank in, and John finally allowed himself to exhale. Noah was alive. There was hope. But as he lay there, struggling to piece together the fragments of his own life, he realized that this moment, the miraculous awakening from his coma, was only the beginning. There was much more to discover, more to understand. But for now, he would hold on to the fact that he was awake, that Noah was alive, and that, together, they still had a chance. Max had always been a quiet presence in the room, a gentle companion in moments of turmoil and uncertainty. As the days passed and John regained his strength, one thing became clear: Max's role in John's recovery was more profound than anyone had initially realized. The dog, a loyal and loving companion, had a unique ability to offer something that no medical treatment or nurse's care could replicate: unconditional love. John had heard the stories before, the miraculous healing that animals, especially dogs, were capable of. But it wasn't until he experienced it firsthand that he began to understand the true depth of their power. Max had been there when John first woke up from his coma, his large brown eyes filled with an emotion John couldn't quite name. The bond between man and dog was immediate, undeniable. Max's presence seemed to anchor John to the present moment, as though the world outside the sterile hospital room didn't matter as long as this faithful companion was near. The doctors and nurses had initially been skeptical about allowing Max into the room. John's condition was fragile, and the risk of infections was always a concern. But after several discussions, and with the support of Emily, the nurse John had grown to trust, they came to a compromise. Max would be allowed to visit, but only under the strictest of conditions. He would be kept away from John's medical equipment and monitored closely at all times. From the moment Max walked through the door, something shifted in John. It was as though a weight was lifted from his chest, and the loneliness that had plagued him during his recovery seemed to fade. Max immediately trotted over to John's bedside, gently laying his head on John's lap, as if offering reassurance and comfort. John ran his fingers through Max's fur, the familiar warmth of the dog's body calming him. It was as if Max understood. He had been waiting for this moment too. In the days that followed, Max's visits became an integral part of John's healing process. Each day, John grew stronger, and each day, Max was there, his presence a steady reminder of the world outside the sterile hospital walls. The once hollow and empty room now felt alive with warmth, a silent promise that John was not alone. There were moments when John would gaze out of the window, his thoughts racing as he struggled to come to terms with his accident, the injuries he had sustained, and the reality of what had happened to him and his family. It was during those moments of reflection that Max would nudge his hand, offering a gentle reminder to stay present. It was as if Max knew that healing wasn't just physical, it was emotional, too. The wounds that John carried in his heart were just as important to address as the ones on his body. Max's bond with Noah was equally powerful. Emily had shared that Max had been an invaluable source of comfort for the baby as well, helping to ease his anxiety in the NICU. The presence of the dog was often enough to soothe Noah when his cries became too overwhelming. It was as if Max understood the language of pain and distress, always knowing when to offer a comforting nudge or a gentle lick. John couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude toward the dog. Max had been there through the darkest moments of his life, offering silent support when words were impossible. It was almost as though Max had sensed John's need for companionship before John himself had fully realized it. The quiet moments spent together, whether it was sitting in the room, watching John as he slowly regained his strength, or simply lying beside him, became John's anchor in a world that was still shifting beneath his feet. As John's health improved, the doctors began to discuss his discharge. While John was eager to leave the sterile confines of the hospital, he couldn't help but feel a sense of reluctance. The bond he had formed with Max, the comfort of knowing that he wasn't alone, had become something he was reluctant to let go of. But there was hope in his heart, a hope that, with time, he and his family could begin the journey of rebuilding their lives together. The day John was discharged, Max was waiting for him outside. As soon as John saw the dog, his heart swelled with emotion. It was as though Max had been waiting for this moment just as eagerly as John had. When John reached out to embrace him, Max's tail wagged furiously, and the two shared an unspoken understanding. It was a reunion, a moment of healing not just for John, but for both of them. Together, they had come through something unimaginable, and together, they would continue to move forward. In the weeks that followed, John's recovery continued, and the power of Max's presence in his life remained undeniable. The dog was more than just a companion. He was a symbol of resilience, loyalty, and hope. He had helped John heal in ways that no medication or therapy could. And as John looked into Max's eyes, he realized that this miraculous recovery wasn't just about his body. It was about the bond they shared, a bond that had brought him back from the brink and helped him find his way home. Max had not only helped heal John's body, he had healed his spirit, and for that, John would forever be grateful. As John's recovery journey unfolded, the presence of Max in his life became a profound testament to the powerful intersection of science and emotion. While doctors and medical professionals relied on cutting-edge technology, medications, and surgical interventions to treat John's physical injuries, it was the unseen, intangible forces, the emotional bond between man and dog, that played a crucial role in his healing. This unquantifiable aspect of John's recovery could not be measured with any medical instruments, but its impact was undeniable. From a scientific perspective, the healing process after a traumatic event like John's accident was multifaceted, involving not only the repair of broken bones and damaged tissues, but also a complex interaction of hormones, brain chemistry, and emotional well-being. The role of companionship, especially from animals, in enhancing mental health and speeding up physical recovery was becoming increasingly recognized by the medical community. Studies have shown that emotional support animals can have a significant positive effect on patients' recovery processes. These animals help lower stress levels, reduce anxiety, and provide an emotional anchor during times of uncertainty. In John's case, the bond he shared with Max was no exception. Max's presence had a direct impact on John's physiological response. Research has shown that when a person interacts with an animal, especially a dog, the body releases oxytocin, a hormone associated with bonding, trust, and emotional connection. This hormone has been shown to reduce blood pressure and heart rate, contributing to a more relaxed and calm state. For John, who had been through a traumatic ordeal, the presence of Max was not just comforting, it was healing. The very act of petting Max or simply sitting with him had a soothing effect, helping to alleviate the anxiety and restlessness John had felt since waking up from his coma. Furthermore, the bond between John and Max helped activate the brain's reward system. The companionship Max provided triggered the release of dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and motivation. In John's case, this wasn't just a fleeting feeling of joy. It was a reinforcement that helped keep him motivated to push through the grueling days of rehabilitation. Each time John felt discouraged or frustrated by the slow pace of his recovery, Max was there, offering a silent, yet powerful reminder of why he needed to keep fighting. The emotional satisfaction that came from being with Max was integral to John's ability to maintain hope during the most difficult moments. But the emotional connection between John and Max wasn't just about biology or neurochemistry. It went deeper than that. For John, Max symbolized more than just a pet. He represented resilience, loyalty, and unwavering support in a time of great vulnerability. After the accident, John had been forced to confront his own fragility. He had witnessed his body's limitations and had come to terms with the fact that life, as he had once known it, would never be the same. But Max's presence in his life reminded him of the strength he had within himself. Every wag of Max's tail, every nudge of affection, was a gentle reminder that despite the setbacks and the challenges, there was still love, and there was still hope. It was also worth reflecting on the therapeutic role Max played in John's emotional recovery. The psychological toll of a traumatic event like John's accident was immeasurable. The fear, the confusion, and the loss of control could easily have spiraled into depression and emotional numbness. But the companionship Max provided helped to alleviate these mental burdens. Max was always there, providing non-judgmental love and affection. In moments when John struggled to find the right words to express his pain or fear, Max didn't need words. He understood. And this silent understanding was what allowed John to start rebuilding his emotional resilience. John's experience mirrored findings from numerous studies on the emotional impact of animal companionship in therapeutic settings. In many instances, patients recovering from surgeries or traumatic injuries have shown remarkable improvements in both their mental and physical health after the introduction of an emotional support animal. This effect is particularly strong when the patient has a deep, personal connection with the animal, as John did with Max. The animal's presence allows for a sense of normalcy and stability amidst the chaos and uncertainty of recovery. In John's case, Max's role extended beyond that of an emotional support animal. Max became a key component of John's psychological well-being. As the days passed, John noticed that his emotional state had improved alongside his physical recovery. He was no longer consumed by fear of the future or overwhelmed by the pain he had endured. Max helped anchor him to the present, reminding him that recovery was not just about getting back to the way things were, but about embracing the process of healing in all its forms: physical, emotional, and mental. It was also important to consider the larger societal implications of John and Max's story. As the medical community continues to recognize the value of emotional support animals, the integration of animals into hospital settings is becoming more common. The therapeutic benefits are clear, and the science behind it continues to grow. Max's presence in John's hospital room was not an isolated case. More and more hospitals and medical facilities are recognizing that healing goes beyond just medical treatments. It involves the entire person, including their emotional and mental state. As John's physical strength continued to return, so did his emotional resilience. And through it all, Max remained by his side, proof of the power of love, companionship, and the healing forces that transcended science. What started as a quiet presence in a hospital room had grown into a life-saving bond, one that proved, once again, that healing is not just a matter of fixing the body. It's about restoring the heart, the mind, and the soul. For John, the emotional journey was just as significant as the physical one. With Max's help, John had learned that the path to recovery wasn't linear, nor was it entirely in his control. But the love he shared with Max, something far deeper than science could explain, had been the greatest catalyst for healing. And in that bond, John found his strength to heal. As Max's presence continued to positively impact the hospital environment, it became increasingly difficult to ignore the profound effect he had on the recovery of both John and Noah. What initially seemed like a series of coincidental events now began to appear as a much deeper connection between Max and the patients he had unknowingly touched with his presence. His loyalty and instinctive protective nature became a central part of the healing process, not just for the family, but also for the hospital staff. It didn't take long for the hospital's medical team to realize that Max was no ordinary dog. Initially, the staff was skeptical. It was difficult for anyone in a clinical setting to accept that a canine could play a role in recovery, especially when the treatments and procedures were rooted in years of scientific research and evidence. However, Max was more than just a dog. He was a symbol of hope, strength, and perseverance. His calm demeanor and unwavering devotion seemed to transcend the sterile walls of the hospital and connect with the deepest parts of the human soul. Doctors and nurses, who had been trained to rely on facts, studies, and measurable outcomes, found themselves questioning their own understanding of medicine. How could a dog have such an impact? The answer, they would later discover, wasn't in the traditional sense of science or treatment. It was in the emotional bond and the unspoken connection that Max brought into the room. His mere presence had a calming influence, reducing the stress levels in the environment and creating a sense of stability and safety. For patients like John and Noah, this emotional support proved to be just as crucial as any medical intervention. The transformation in Max's role was not just observed by the medical professionals, but by the patients and their families as well. The hospital, which had once been a place filled with the cold hum of machines and the constant rush of medical procedures, began to feel more like a place of healing. The staff realized that Max was not just there to comfort John and Noah. He was also offering something much larger to the entire hospital community. He was teaching them about compassion, about the unquantifiable connection between beings, and about the importance of emotional well-being in the healing process. John, who had been in a coma for so long, had no memory of Max's first few visits. But when he finally awoke and heard the name Max, it was as if a switch had been flipped in his mind. His deep connection with Max was immediate and tangible, transcending the confines of words. The bond that had been formed during their time together, without either of them even realizing it, was unbreakable. And now, with John awake and alert, the realization set in that Max had played a critical part in his survival and recovery. This was not lost on the hospital staff either. Max's loyalty to John was something they couldn't ignore. Every day, he was by John's side, quietly laying at the foot of his bed or gently nuzzling up to him in a way that only a dog could. The staff started to see Max as not only a symbol of strength, but as a reminder of the essential role that compassion plays in recovery. His ability to provide comfort without being asked, to offer emotional support when needed, became an integral part of John's ongoing recovery. It wasn't long before Max became somewhat of a celebrity within the hospital. His story spread like wildfire, and staff from various departments came to see the dog that had helped save a life. He was no longer just a retired police dog. He was a hero. Patients who had never met John or Noah would come by just to pet Max, offering him treats and showering him with affection. The atmosphere in the hospital seemed to shift as Max became a figure of comfort and strength for all those around him. For the doctors and nurses, Max represented a new understanding of the human-animal bond. They began to discuss his presence more openly in meetings, reflecting on the idea that healing was not always a purely scientific or medical process. Sometimes, it was about the emotional connections that helped people get through their darkest times. Max had bridged that gap between science and heart, showing the staff that there was power in things that couldn't be measured on a chart or in a test result. This recognition of Max's role was not limited to the hospital's internal workings. Word of Max's extraordinary bond with John and Noah reached the outside world, and soon, media outlets began covering the story. The story of the retired police dog that had become an unlikely hero in the healing of a family went viral, further cementing Max's place as a symbol of hope, resilience, and the importance of emotional well-being in recovery. Through all the attention, Max remained humble and gentle. He never sought the spotlight, never asked for praise. His love for John and Noah was unconditional, and he continued to serve as their protector and companion, without hesitation. It was this very simplicity in his actions that made Max's role in the recovery of both John and Noah so powerful. He was a constant reminder to everyone that healing wasn't just about medications and treatments. It was about connection, love, and the strength of the human spirit. Max's recognition was not just about the accolades or the attention he received. It was about the way he changed the lives of those around him. He had shown the world the incredible bond that can exist between humans and animals, a bond that transcends language, time, and circumstances. Max, the retired police dog, had become a true hero in every sense of the word. As John's journey through recovery came to an end, it was clear that his transformation was nothing short of remarkable. What began as a harrowing ordeal in a hospital room, filled with uncertainty, pain, and fear, evolved into a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the profound impact of love and companionship. John's physical recovery was impressive, but it was his emotional and psychological rebirth that truly demonstrated the depth of the healing process. Max, the dog who had entered John's life under the most unexpected of circumstances, became the key figure in this transformation. Through their unspoken connection, Max provided John with more than just emotional support. He gave him the strength to persevere through the darkest moments of his recovery. The unwavering loyalty of an animal, combined with the quiet power of companionship, helped John face the psychological toll of his trauma, the pain of rehabilitation, and the uncertainties of his future. Throughout this journey, John learned that healing was not just about fixing what was broken. It was about embracing the process of transformation, both physical and emotional. The bond he shared with Max taught him that recovery was not linear. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, and periods of fear. But it was in those moments that John discovered the true power of hope. Max, with his simple presence, helped restore John's belief in himself and in the future. Hope, in its purest form, became the guiding light in John's path. Hope that his body could heal, hope that he could reclaim his independence, and hope that the future still held a world of possibilities. And it was through this hope that John was able to transform from a patient, fragile and broken, to a man empowered by the love and support of those around him. John's transformation also mirrored the broader lesson that we, as a society, have the ability to heal in unexpected ways. The combination of medical science and emotional care proved to be a potent force in John's recovery. His experience underscored the importance of holistic healing, where emotional well-being is just as significant as physical health. The role of emotional support animals, like Max, will undoubtedly continue to play a critical part in recovery processes, providing comfort, reducing stress, and offering an anchor during turbulent times. In the end, John's story is one of triumph over adversity, not through grand gestures or quick fixes, but through the quiet, steadfast bond between a man and a dog. It is a reminder that, even in the most challenging of circumstances, transformation is possible, and hope is the force that drives us forward. As John and Max's story continues, it stands as a beacon of the unyielding potential for healing, love, and the power of connection in the face of life's greatest challenges. Through hope and transformation, John found a new beginning, and the future, once shrouded in uncertainty, now holds endless possibilities.